Hey, welcome to 2025. Happy New Year. Katie here with a note of what to expect in the coming weeks from the Bittersweet Life. Every Monday, as usual, you'll find a new episode of the show. That's been the same for the last 10 years. But we're adding a couple things. Tiffany is going to start making special mini episodes a few times a month with insider tips and secrets when it comes to visiting Rome or Italy. And you'll find those mini episodes on Wednesdays. And then, this show has been on the air for 10 years, and there are tons of great episodes in our archives. We're going to start airing one of those episodes every Friday. I think you'll find those episodes just as enjoyable as the new ones. So take a listen, let us know what you think, and if you can, make a monthly or one-time contribution to the show, especially if you enjoy listening and perhaps appreciate the lack of interrupting commercial advertising as you listen. You'll find links to donate in the show notes or at thebittersweetlife.net. And if you've been listening for the last couple weeks, you know that we are raising money to buy me a new traveling microphone. The microphone I've been taking to Rome for years is now over a decade old and not sounding so good. I want to thank Jill, Joanne, Ginny, and Stefania for already contributing to that fund. If that tugs on your heartstrings, find the donation button at our website, thebittersweetlife.net. And if you don't have the money, you know another thing that would really help us out in 2025? Tell a friend about the show. That means a lot to us. Or leave us a review wherever you listen. And now, on to the show. Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katie Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell. Tiffany is away this week, but I am joined by Darlene Sullivan. She has been a guest in some ways several times on this show. The last time she actually appeared as a person talking to me was back in episode 435, which was titled When Expat Dreams Come True. But Tiffany and I have also done a couple other episodes using letters that you sent in on the show to prompt a discussion about whether or not you should move abroad and if there's ever a point when it's too late to make the move. And it was actually a Patreon supporter, Catherine, who wrote in and said she would like to hear from you again to find out what had happened to you. And she remembered that the very first episode we talked about you thinking about moving to Italy, you were still in Brooklyn thinking about leaving New York. And then the second time, I think you had just arrived in Bolzano after making the move. And I was looking for that letter and I found it. And you were writing to us in June of 2020. So when we did the episode in person, you came to Rome and I was in Rome, so we sat down together. Anyway, all this is to say that we want to hear what has happened, where you've been, and how it's going. Let's hear from you a little bit, though. What's a slight recap? When did you leave New York, and what were you thinking when you left?
So I arrived in Italy September 6th of 2019. So a couple months before the pandemic broke out in Italy.
Yeah.
So perfect moment to move.
Yeah.
Respect. And I arrived in Bolzano, which is in the north, in the Dolomites, to do a master's degree in eco-social design. So that was kind of the catalyst to get a student visa and get myself settled. But I had wanted to move to Italy for years. I have family there. And so the original letter I wrote was just, it's been on my mind since I was in my teens, then in my 20s, then I studied abroad. It never really left. Should I do it? Should I not? And then I ended up doing this master's degree. And I'm a New Yorker, and I ended up in the mountains and living there for 5 years.
Wow. I mean, yeah, if nobody's ever been to Bolzano, can you describe what kind of a difference that would be to New York?
Let's just say I cried on the train as I was arriving because I just felt so insignificant to the size of the mountains.
Uh,
It's incredible. It's a beautiful, amazing place that I think anyone should go to for vacation. I just do not recommend staying for 5 years unless you love mountain climbing and want to make that your life. I have to say, I ended up a little stuck there, which I regret, and we'll get through that. But it is a wonderfully beautiful place, and I'm happy I moved to Italy, but I'm not so happy that I did it in the way that I did.
yeah. It's not a small town, but compared to New York, it is a small town, you know.
Yeah.
And Bolzano, that whole region, and I love visiting that region. I was just there when I was recently in Italy, but it's kind of almost like a cluster of little towns throughout the whole mountainside, right? So, but I also feel like whenever I'm up there, sometimes you don't encounter English as much as you do in some of the bigger cities. So, I mean, what was your day to day life like there?
So yeah, I was doing a master's degree in design, so I was with other designers, but the town itself, I will say, yeah, it's not that small, but in respect to New York, it was tiny for me. But also something that's really unique to the region that's worth mentioning is they speak not only Italian but also German.
Yes.
And when you're in the center of Bolzano, you're mostly speaking German, at least where I was living. So for me, that added some difficulty and challenge to assimilating and just overall making the experience a little strange for me, or I think just kind of doubling down on the outsider feeling because you sit down at a table and you're not only surrounded by Italian, your second language, but also a third language that you don't know. And this would happen, and because I'm fair-skinned and blonde, even though I have some Italian heritage, people would just automatically assume I was German because I was the only American. And
Mm.
now there's more Americans in the town, but I was really within the university community at the time and then just surrounding area. There were no other Americans and no other expats besides German. I mean, predominantly, I can't say there were no other expats, but within that community, it was mostly Germans and other regions of Italy. So every day I would encounter someone speaking German to me and then me having to respond in Italian and them realizing it's my second language. Why are you not speaking German with me? And them just kind of not expecting me to be American. Yes. Unique thing.
Why did you get stuck there that long for 5 years? Was it the university? Was it COVID? Was it just general
It was
malaise? What was it for
It was
you?
a little bit of everything. It was COVID originally because I was like, oh, I'll do this student visa, but if I don't like the program, I'll move to a big city. COVID hit, and I said, I might as well finish this master's degree, and I'm interested in it. I'll keep going. Worked on a thesis that I'm really proud of, so that added to me staying, but actually doing my thesis in Puglia, so that's another story. But ended up trying to get out at any chance I could. And then different attempts to try to leave, but not feeling like I found the right place. I tried to move to Rome at some point. I think that's when we had met. I had talked about that. I was laid off from my job at the time, the day that I was about to sign a contract.
Mm.
So I said, okay, it might be better for me to turn back and go to Bolzano because it's a cheaper cost of living. I have some friends there. So that complicated things.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was building up my freelance again because I had been working as a director. I work as a designer, I'm a textile designer, and I was working remotely as a director for a company that I had been working for back in New York. So I was lucky that we had this relationship. They hired me, but then the company closed. I was laid off. And I found myself, okay, I guess I'll go backwards. I'm not gonna move yet. Met someone, started dating, stayed there longer. That didn't work out, was not the best situation for me. And I've recently relocated to Milan as of a week ago. So it's been a roller coaster of events. And
Yeah.
I think after the breakup or after that, I was really This was a couple months ago, really thinking about moving back home and really at a place where I was like, it hasn't been that great. COVID, living in a town I didn't really like, and just try every single thing I tried to do would not work. There was some bureaucratic issue, some other thing. And I just was like, maybe it's time to go. But like, I'm an extremely stubborn person. So I just was like, no, it's not gonna happen yet. I'm not gonna let it happen because of a hard period. I'm gonna go home when I'm in a good place and I decide to go home. So that was what brought me to my most recent stop, which I'm really happy about.
I
So
mean, that's a pretty interesting distinction that you didn't want to go home because you felt like you were failing. You'd rather go home when you felt like, okay, I got it. I mean, this has been like you mentioned, a long dream. This has been a dream that you've had since about, what, 16 years old, that you would one day end up living in Italy. How much of it is the dream that kept you going during all that, where you're just like, no, it's supposed to be great. There's got to be a way
yeah,
that this is great.
I think that's exactly what it was. It was like, no, this is supposed to be great. I'm not gonna let it happen. But at the same time, I have to say I learned a lot, and this is something that I can just offer others, is that I learned that like I should have followed my intuition in a lot of different places. I'm a city person. I'm never gonna be a person who loves the mountains. And
Mm.
when I had that feeling as soon as I arrived, I should have said, hey, this isn't my place. What's my next stop? Let me do. But I think on a certain level, because you're an expat and you're trying to assimilate and you're trying, that I kept trying to say, like, I need to make this work. I need to be less closed-minded. I need to figure out how this is going to work for me. But like at a certain point, you have to say, this isn't working for me. What does work for me? And how can I get there? And I
Mm-hmm.
think I kept trying to like rationalize things and say like, oh, I don't want to fail at this. I am gonna like the mountains. And like not everyone else will like the mountains. So,
Well,
yeah.
yes, I guess I could see that the pressure to sort of try something new. I mean, that's, it's not just a love of Italy; it's a trying on of a new life. So, yeah,
Yeah.
but how do you identify when the trying something new is not just uncomfortable because it's new and because it's wrong? That is a very challenging thing for sure.
That's exactly what it was. It's like, is this wrong or is it just uncomfortable? And I think it took me a long time to realize that it's okay for this not to be my thing. And what is my thing? And I think also like when you're in that environment, or what I found is that people don't come from where I come from. And I don't mean that by the US and New York City. I mean like my personal experiences, what I do for a living, my interests. So, you hear people and they're like, oh, Milan, oh, Rome, it's terrible there. But, it's like we're not the same person. We're not, and you kind of like, at least for me, having so many things be different and having to assimilate to so many different new things, it was hard to distinguish what advice. I feel like at a certain point, I think COVID also just like broke me down to a point where it was like, who am I and what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a long time to realize that I probably was really affected by being an expat right when COVID hit. And not just that, but I had some other things happen to me that I just felt like I think I've been through trauma and I'm ignoring that. And I'm like attributing this to failing as an expat or failing at this experience when it was like a lot of other things happening.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up, not to get too personal, but I ended up having a miscarriage with this relationship that I had. And like I said, I was in a German speaking area. So I'm in a hospital by myself. In this situation, people are speaking German to me. I speak Italian and English fluently, but for whatever reason, they continued to speak to me in German. And, so there were like a lot of things going on to a certain point where I was like, am I failing at being an expat or am I having some serious hard times? And I need to separate those two things and say, I didn't fail at Italy. A lot of stuff happened, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah. I mean, have you been able to sort of parse some of that out? How do you define the trauma versus like the loneliness or the otherness of being an expat?
I think it was the culmination of all of it. And then just at a certain point being like, you know what? I need to lift myself up again, find a place where I think I'm going to be the most comfortable, where it's the most comparable to my lifestyle, and then judge whether that's working. And the weird thing is, I relocated here and I've been here 2 weeks actually, and I immediately feel better. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh, so this is what I should have done 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It was like a coming back into my body, kind of like, oh, okay, like I'm excited about this. This feels like the right place. And it came together easily. It was like I was looking at apartments and and I didn't like the neighborhoods. And I was like, I don't know. Then I found the neighborhood. I loved it. It just felt right. And then I automatically realized I know 4 people in this neighborhood. It kind of came about where I didn't realize where this appointment was for this apartment. I had a lot of different appointments planned and then realized, oh, I'm getting an appointment in walking distance from 3 people I know, which is totally random.
Mm-hmm.
And then just in a really nice neighborhood that I really like. And it just kind of all came together. And I was like, this is, I think, what I was waiting for. Because I kept like traveling around and being like, where am I going to live? What? And I think I kept trying on things that just were not the right size for me, you know? And then just being like, oh, why okay, I am the obvious cliche and this is where I want to live. Like I need to go back to a city, I need to go back to a creative life and yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you say you were going around trying other things on, were you trying out other little towns? I know you considered
I
Rome,
was.
but beyond that.
Yeah, I tried a lot of places. I tried Naples because I have some friends there. I tried Oslo, which is in Veneto, because it's not too far from my family, and it's a really pretty town. I mean, I went to Tuscany. I was just really seeking out where I would feel the most comfortable. And at the end of the day, I think it wasn't just, oh, I need to live in a city and I need to have a metro. It wasn't really that. It was also, and this just might be like, I think a lot of people want to move to Italy because they go on vacation and the vacation, it's so much fun and it's so beautiful and the food is great. And people want to like retire here and all of that. And all of that is great. And I think that if that's what you want to do, that's amazing. But for me, I felt like everywhere I went, it was just overrun by tourism.
Mm.
And that's been the last 20 years. I mean, I've been coming to Italy my entire life, and I'm in my 40s now. So, I mean, I just feel like it's just escalated a lot in the last 10 years. And I just couldn't, even in Rome, I was like, I feel overrun by tourists, and I don't feel like I don't want to feel like an expat every day. I
Mm.
want to feel like I live here. And I think that was my choice for Bolzano. That's why I kind of chose Bolzano because I said, okay, I'm going to be around people that are not American and I'm going to assimilate. And maybe occasionally you do need an American around you. And that's something that I learned as well. I mean, even having this conversation about my experiences, it's not something that I could have with other people there. You're in your head a lot. And I had one colleague in my master's who was also an American, and we became very close, but then she left immediately after finishing. But we had become very close for that reason. I think Milan for me feels less touristy because everyone's sort of working and doing their thing and just kind of living life. That's something that was important to me. Like I wanted to be in a place where I could just live day to day and not feel like I'm the other. And, you know, in more tourist driven places, you're spoken to in English constantly.
Hmm.
And I mean, in Milan, everyone speaks English too, but I feel like it's not their first inclination to start with you in English. And so I felt like I could just kind of like slide under the radar a little bit more
Hmm.
and just live.
Yeah. I want to ask you, since you said that you felt like in Bolzano, particularly that you were living in your own head, which I'm sure was also like a COVID thing too. And I mean, that was very much my experience of early expat life was for me, as you know, from listening to the show, I didn't even speak Italian when I moved there because I wasn't expecting to move there. And so I felt like I spent whole days just thinking my own thoughts and skirting on the margins, and if it had been like a cartoon drawing, I would have been shaded in gray while the rest of like life was bursting around me and interacting with each other. Now, how do you do when you are in this an experience where you have to live in your head so much of the time? I mean, you were so well connected in New York, so it's kind of basically the opposite experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extremely difficult. I think it did take a toll on me because I think I got to a point where I was like, until very recently, I think that was part of my problem is because I was like, I don't really know who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Like, I just know how I'm existing day to day here and like what's keeping me going. And I think, like, and I was in this relationship and I probably wasn't even that fun to be in a relationship with, to be honest.
Mm.
I mean, there were a lot of other things with this person that was, but I also think that I probably wasn't my best self either because I'm just kind of I didn't feel I don't, there's this thing that happens, I think, when you're not mother tongue and you're in a group, even when you speak the language, and this isn't for everybody, but this was my experience in a group that I just couldn't be funny and I couldn't be myself and address every kind of conversation. I could only like tunnel into one conversation or another conversation and have like little side conversations with the person next to me. And I'm a very animated person. And I'm like, I'm funny, damn it. And I can't be funny. And like, and it was just like very, very hard for me to like have a different, I feel like I assumed a different personality.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I don't like me when I'm funny.
uh,
Yeah, it takes a while. And I feel like now I can like make jokes and I mean, I think now I'm a little closer to my regular personality, but it takes so long to get there.
yeah, I was just curious when you were dating over there and you're in a German/Italian place. Was it a person that spoke Italian at least?
Oh yeah, he
Forging
was an
your
Italian.
Okay, I'm like, or are
Yeah.
you forging your way into German as well at this point?
No, he was an Italian, but I mean that's a whole other story. I feel like I was loved bombed into thinking it was the most amazing thing, and then it was just not.
I mean, I know you speak fluent Italian, and we don't have to delve into it, but was it harder for you to realize? Like Tiffany and I have done shows about how sometimes when there's a cultural difference, it's harder to figure out like what's actually going on. What do you think about that?
I think that's definitely the case. I think when I met him, I was being like really love bombed and really like just really extreme. And I didn't know that. Like, I just thought, like, oh, this is what happens when you date an Italian. And I think if it happened to me in the US, like the same exact thing, I would have been like, this is a red flag. I should probably pay attention to this. And just like certain things that would happen, I just chalked it up to cultural differences, even though I have Italian family. Like it's like I'm not so far from the culture that it's like, oh, whoa, what is happening here? But still, it was really, and at a certain point, one of my girlfriends said to me, I think this is happening, but you don't realize it because you're not Italian. And I was like, you're probably right. Like, you're probably right. There's a much more of a difference that like a nuance that I'm not like there's something lost in translation. And he was fluent in English as well. So we would go back and forth. Like when we were watching movies or listening to music, we'd mostly speak in English because he was very into like American music and film. But when like day-to-day stuff, we'd always speak in Italian. So there was kind of a fluency with both languages and a going back and forth, but I still felt like fundamentally there was a lot of disconnect where I would just be like, he probably meant this, and it was kind of like, just kind of
Yeah,
certain things where you're just like, sure.
yeah. So how did you finally figure it out? Was it like the relationship ended and you decided, okay, I'm moving, or like was it you already wanted to move and of course you guys went through this trauma of a miscarriage, but how did it all lay out where you finally say, enough already. I don't want to be here anymore.
I think that the relationship wasn't really working. Like I said, he was really like love bombing me and pretending to be this certain person. And then when things like the miscarriage happened and like serious relationship things where you need a person to actually be there, he was like non-existent, you know? So it was like, after that sort of happened, I realized, okay, I'm not really getting the support that I should have been getting. But at the same time, it's like, I think also when you don't have your normal friend support group, your baseline normal, like when you don't have that to like reference,
Mm.
I mean, I felt like that I was kind of like maybe lingering too long, much longer than I should have. Whereas if I was home, I probably would have been like, I'm not treated the way I should be treated. And like I would have walked out the door. But I was like, well, like, I mean, it's probably fine. I just kind of had a lot more excuses that I made for this person, but I always knew that that place wasn't going to be enough for me. So it was finally just getting up the courage to say, okay, between this place and this not being what it needs to be, I need to make some major changes. And that's when you contacted me about 2 months ago, and I was like, this could go either way. So I need to wait to have this interview because I really was like, I might move home. I might just pack up and just go, or I might decide to stay. And I really just sat there for a couple weeks and just was like, what do I feel? And what I felt was, no, this isn't the end of me. Like, I'm staying, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah. I love that. And how did you figure that out? Journaling? Were you just staring off into the mountains and thought,
Oh,
not
actually,
these?
that's an
You know.
interesting story. It's an interesting story because it was a little bit, but first, I want to say, I mean, I really just felt like I couldn't let that be. I felt like I didn't get the experience that I came for. I needed to try it in a way that was more familiar to me, aka a city, something like Milan, something where it's a little bit more comparable to New York. And I feel like maybe I could have more of an experience that I was expecting. So I said, without that, if I go home, I'm always going to have that. I'm going to have that regret that I had before for not moving.
Mm.
And I definitely, as an advice to anyone out there, move as fast as possible because, like, just don't wait because it doesn't get any easier. And I'm not saying it's ever too late, it doesn't get too late, but you will feel like you should have done it sooner. Like that's my only regret is that I didn't do it sooner, but
Mm.
not that I did it. Even if it didn't go so well at so many points, I'm still happy that I did it. And I have to say that. I just wish I did it differently. But from your question, like how did I was actually friends of mine from the States came and they wanted to meet in Venice, and I have family not too far from Venice. So I said, okay, let's do that, and we can go visit my family, and we can do a day in Venice. So we did that, and they went off to the airport, and I had such a great time with them, and it was just so nice to be with. I mean, these were old friends; these were like high school friends.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like so nice to be with familiar people that I didn't have to try hard. And I even pretended to be a tourist the whole time. I was like, I'm not even going to speak in Italian. Like, let's just do this, speak English and like be tourist. And so I did things that I would have never done in Venice because I've been to Venice like maybe 30, 40 times. So I never do tourist things. But after 2 days of being a tourist in Venice, I said, oh my God, I've had enough. I just want to go to a really small cafe out of the touristy area and like journal, just stare at the water. And like, so I was doing that and I was really, and I said, maybe I should go home because, I just had this amazing time with my friends. And, maybe it is time to go home. And I said, I really need a sign that I should move to Milan or something. I need a sign, like a concrete sign. And that I hear this person next to me in a voice that I know, and I hear them say a name. I know a girl named Sally. And I hear this person say, oh, Sally. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I know a Sally. And I turn around and it sounded like her now husband's voice. And I turn around and it's them. It's this couple that I know that live in Milan. And they're
Mm.
sitting next to me in this tiny hole in the wall place in Venice. And they said, we've been sitting here deciding if it was you or not. Like, we've been staring at you. And so we got to talking, and they were like, you know what? If you're looking for a place in Milan, just stay at our place. We're going to be gone for 2 months. Stay at our place, find an apartment. We're going on our honeymoon. Like, just stay there and look for a place. And I was like, I mean, I just asked my journal and it came to me.
Yeah, like instantly. That rarely happens.
Yeah, and so all of these things just kind of, and then I got this apartment, didn't know it was near their neighborhood. Ended up, I'm a 15-minute walk from their place.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was just kind of came together. And I said, okay, I'm supposed to stay here. This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and like you
Yeah.
said, it's early days. You're recording this sitting in the kitchen, you said, because it's the only table that's in the entire, like you don't have a desk yet. You don't have a,
Yeah, I don't have a desk
yeah,
yet.
it's so new. All right, well, before we end, let's get an outlook in case we're gonna have you come back again later on, by popular request, I'm sure. What are you going to be doing in Milan? Do you have a job? What's the outlook? And how long did you rent your apartment for? What's your current plan in your mind?
I signed a lease that's called it in Italy. They do contracts for 4+4. So it's a 4-year lease, but you have to give 6 months notice if you leave.
Okay.
This landlord said, I never have a problem renting this apartment, even if you wanted to leave a month notice, it's fine. And what am I doing? Someone randomly I'm gonna plug in my thesis right here. So I worked on a thesis called Flocking Together, and it's stories and struggles of growing a local wool industry.
Hmm.
And basically, it's about local production of wool. And a girl just randomly found my thesis, called me, and she and I are working on a European project to work with natural fibers from Liguria. So Geneva is not so far from Milan. So we're going to be working on this project with natural fibers from the area to make carpets. But I also just work remotely as a textile designer. After I got laid off, I built up my business with clients, and I have one Italian client, and I'm trying to get some more clients, but I mainly work for US clients. So that's what I'm still doing here, but hoping to slowly have more projects in person because I'm really getting tired of doing everything on my computer.
And your textiles, from what I saw from what you were doing back in New York, you're so good at it. Just so great. Is there, I know that that business is no longer there. Can people like look at your work somewhere or?
Yeah, so my website is darleneduredesign.com.
Well, I'll put a link to your website in the show notes in case you want
Yeah.
to look. And I mean, so you have this 4-year lease. You just got there. So, jury's out. This is the new chapter. The chapter has been turned. Bolzano is in the past. Do you think you'd ever visit Bolzano again? Or you like wipe your hands?
I do really love, I will say, I learned to love it more than I ever thought I would. It's a beautiful place. I recommend anyone going there for like a week. I don't recommend living there, but I do recommend it's funny, I don't want to like go over time, but someone asked me when I first arrived there, what do you miss the most from New York besides your friends and family? And I said Italian food.
Yeah.
For me, it's just like not Italian. I mean, I grew up with the best Italian food from the south of Italy, right in New York. So for me, I was like, well, I miss Italian food, but and everyone looked at me like I was crazy. But I still stand by that statement 5 years later.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, because it does
uh,
have like that German influence. It's like it's a totally different thing.
it's a different
Hmm.
cuisine. It has its own charm, and I won't say anything bad about Bolzano anymore. It's just not for me. But if I could give any advice to anyone, it's find your place that makes you happy and don't be afraid to move on and try something else if it's not making you happy.
Yeah. Well, and you went over on a student visa, which is now done. You've done your thesis. How are you there now?
That's another complicated story, but basically, after you study, you're given 1 year to find work. And because of the influx of immigration, I was on a waiting list for that 1 year visa. So I was given an extra year because I finally got my appointment, and they said, okay, we're giving students an extra year. So now I'm on that extra year, but I opened up a partita IVA to get like a tax ID to
Mm-hmm.
do business here. And so I should be able to stay as a freelancer after this. However, I had the right, and this is probably another episode for you, but I had the right to get citizenship if you haven't done it already. Basically, I have the right to get citizenship through Ancestry or residency. However, I dragged my feet on this, had the paperwork for the last 5 years, was extremely busy with everything we just talked about, decided to do it this year, had some difficulty with some documents, and they changed the law, and I am
Uh,
no longer eligible. They changed it on the 3rd of October.
oh,
And so I'm in the middle of a process with a lawyer to try to figure out if there's some loopholes, but they're making a lot of changes to that citizenship process as well as just the residency process as well. So right at the time when everyone is trying to exit the States for reasons we don't need to get into, they're making it more difficult.
was there a particular requirement that knocked you out from contention?
If your because I have a grandfather from Italy, but he was born in Germany, and so that kind of blocks that line, even though he's
Mm,
Italian. He would roll over in his grave if someone said he was German instead.
yeah.
But basically, and so that I was blocked out of the residency through that side, but
Mm,
the other side was my great grandfather, and because my grandmother was a minor when he naturalized. I am blocked out. Whereas
mm,
before it was just like if he naturalized after her birth, I would still be in the line. But
mm,
because she was a minor, they're changing it to they should be over 18 and she was 16. So because of that 2 year difference, I'm now blocked out. And so
mm.
yeah, it's a huge disappointment, but I also dragged my feet for a long time. If you've heard anything, I'm sure you've heard a lot. Yeah, and you know from firsthand the Italian bureaucracy. It's like when you start the paperwork and you do one thing and then and you get like rejected so many times that you're just like, I give up. I'll try again next year. And that was what I kept doing as I just kept going like, I can't do this. Forget. And that's another advice I want to give. If you need to get anything done, just hire a lawyer. Stop trying to do it yourself. It's not worth it.
Well, at the time back in 2020 when you wrote, you said that moving was, and you, of course, you were saying besides the fact that we're in COVID, besides the fact that, that it was still the best thing that you'd ever done. And I wrote it down just so I could quote you back to yourself. You said you weren't sure how long it would last, but you were grateful for the time. And
Oh, wow. I guess I was having a really good time in 2020 during COVID.
or
It got worse before it got better again. No, it's a roller coaster. And
yeah,
I can say that I'm still happy I did it.
yeah.
It's a roller coaster, but I'm much happier that I did it than if I hadn't done it. So, yeah.
Oh, well, we will have to check in again and see how it's going.
I'm just excited overall to get a good new start. And yeah, we'll see where that leads me.
Yeah. Well, keep us
Yeah.
posted for sure. Thanks for jumping on, and thanks to Catherine for suggesting that I reach out to you and find
Yeah,
out what's
thank
going
you,
on.
Catherine. Yeah, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Katie. I really enjoyed it. I feel like we could talk for about 5 hours.
That's probably true. I think that's true. All right, well, we'll leave it there this time. Thank you so much. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell. We'll talk to you next week. Bye. If you would like to move to Italy one day, be sure to visit it first. And maybe a good starting point is Rome. You have the chance to delve into the secret side of Rome this very year, alongside Tiffany and me. This October, from the 5th to the 11th, we will introduce you to Rome's secret side and tell you amazing stories along the way. Our trip to Rome, the Bittersweet Life trip to Rome, is a trip you will never forget. And it might even be the best trip you've ever taken. You can find all the details at thebittersweetlife.net. I hope you join us in Rome for an unforgettable experience. All right, so here you thought we were done, but we're not done because Of course, oftentimes we talk afterwards, and then you were saying all these wonderful things. So we're going to tape just a little bit more because you have to tell me what you were just telling me. You have to share that with everybody because it's so lovely. So please, I'll let you introduce it however you like.
Okay. I was mentioning to Katie after the show that during the summer I got a tattoo. And I got that too because I was having a hard time. And I decided to get this phrase in Italian. Well, actually, I was with a friend, an American friend, who said, let's get a tattoo together. Do you know any Italian phrases that you'd want? She wanted me to draw something since I'm an illustrator. And I said, I need a lot more time for that.
Yeah.
I need to, that's something I really need to sit with. And she said, what about an Italian phrase that you love? And it came to mind this phrase that it's so simple. So the phrase that I chose was cosa fai di bello. And what that means really in loose translation is what are you doing that's beautiful?
Mm.
And so instead of, how we ask in English, what are you doing? They say, what are you doing that's beautiful? And it sort of forces you to think of something positive when someone asks you what you're doing. And that just really hits me. And I thought, what a beautiful thing. I want to remember that when I'm having a hard time, when I'm just cleaning my apartment or doing something even worse, who knows? It makes me change my perspective. And so when I went to the tattoo parlor, the guy said, what are you getting? And I mentioned it. And he said, why are you getting that? And I explained the concept. And he said, I never really thought about it that way, but now I want the tattoo too. I'm so happy that I got this little tiny tattoo on my arm because it makes me reflect every time I look at it.
I love the idea of thinking about that or even asking people that. Instead of being like, how are you? Saying, what are you doing that's beautiful is a much more interesting, lovely way to start a conversation with somebody. All right. All right. Bye, Darlene.
Thanks,
We'll see you
Katie.
later. Bye.